The study session of the Aurora City Council on Monday, July 19th, 2021 is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Coffin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bernstein.
Here.
Councilmember Berzins.
Here.
Councilmember Coombs.
Present.
Councilmember Gardner.
Here.
Councilmember Gruber. Councilmember Gruber.
Here.
Councilmember Hills.
Here.
Councilmember Lawson.
I'm here, but I'm going to have to connect to another computer because I can't get onto video.
Councilmember Marcano.
Present.
Councilmember Murillo.
Present.
There's a quorum.
Katie, do you need to make an announcement on the call-in?
Yes, we're going to have Robbie Sherman make an announcement for the call-in line.
Good evening. Thank you for joining tonight's Aurora City Council study session. If you are listening on the phone, please note public comments are not taken during study sessions. The phone line is in listen-only mode. The council welcomes comments from residents at regular council meetings on both matters appearing on the agenda and during public invited to be heard. The phone line opens for sign up on those evenings at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no mayor's update, no issue updates. Consent calendar, a motion to approve item number 2A through 2H.
Mayor,
Councilmember Lawson.
is there any way that I can pull 2C and 2D, please?
Sure. 2D and 2C and 2C and 2D.
That's correct, for discussion and questions.
Okay, the motion before us then is adoption of the consent calendar, item number 2A, 2B, 2E, 2F, 2G, and 2H. Motion?
Mayor, I'm not certain we need a motion in study session. I don't know whether.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're correct. You're correct. Is there any objection? Very well. And is there any objection to moving all consent items except for items 2C and 2D forward? Seeing none, items, all items. Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. I think someone else actually beat me to the punch. I don't know who, though.
You know, I don't care. Just go. Please.
Okay. So I just wanted to bring up that last year, I think it was around October, we had discussed reworking our model service plan. And it looks like there was, I'm looking at the minutes here, there was agreement to do that, but the motion to adopt some revisions failed for lack of a second. I think there was a procedural faux pas that took place, but I am just wondering if we can, I guess, how council feels about bringing that conversation back up and getting those changes through. There's a lot of new residential metro districts here, and a large portion of what we had discussed back then was to, add some transparency measures for future home buyers in metro districts. And I just wanted to make sure that we could adopt what we had worked on before.
You can have the subject matter on its own in a study session, or you simply yourself can move it forward through the process because it was never adopted.
Sure. The reason I'm speaking up now is to kind of get a temperature of the council and see how we feel about that.
Mayor?
Is there Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I'm not sure that I'm actually understanding Councilmember Marcano, but you're talking about 2C and 2D, villages at Murphy Creek Metro District service plans that went through MNF?
No, ma'am. I'm referring to all of these. I actually meant to respond to the mayor's ask for the general consent question.
Oh,
Since these are all metro districts, that's why I wanted to bring this up. I felt it was relevant. And I just wanted to see how we were feeling about the conversation we had last year. And if we wanted to actually move through these measures, bring it back up, obviously, through the process. I just want to get council's temperature on that.
Pretty unusual. Is there any objection? Is there any objection to having a Metro District discussion on a future study session to review what discussions occurred last year on this issue? Is there any objection?
Mayor, I would recommend, this is Dave Gruber, I would recommend that given the changes in the law that that's going to be a rather substantial process. Okay. It might be better to have the staff work that and then bring it through management and finance through the standard process. And bring it straight to study session, I think it might be too complex for that. That would probably be a two-day process.
Okay. Is there any objection to Councilmember Gruber's recommendation?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coons.
Yes, the revisions that were suggested already came through the process and through a pretty substantial process. So I would object to bringing it back through that process over again.
Further objection, Councilmember Hiltz.
Yeah, thank you. I just, if it does go back to the committee process, because it's a state law, I think that impacted it, if Pfizer could just be looped in on those conversations. That's all, just for the in conjunction.
I'm sorry, what is your recommendation, Councilmember Hiltz?
If it goes through the committee process and it goes through M&F, just to make sure that Pfizer is also plugged into that process, because it kind of crosses over.
Okay.
That's all.
Councilmember, so to Gruber's recommendation, to Councilmember Gruber's recommendation to send it through the process again. And I understand Councilmember Marcano, I think, objects to that. Is there any other objection?
No, Mayor. To be clear, since there were changes that took place at the legislature, I'd like to see how those impact what we worked on. So I'm fine with it going back to committee. I just want to make sure we don't leave that.
Is there any objection to having it go back through committee? And okay, very well. Then it will go back through committee. It will need a sponsor. Okay. With that, then I see no objection to the consent calendar items 2A through 2B and items 2E through 2H. Item 2C. Will clerk please read the title to item 2C?
Item 2C is a resolution to approve the Villages at Murphy Creek No. 3 Metropolitan District Service Plan.
A brief staff presentation.
Good evening. This is Trisarina Dancy with the Office of Development Assistance. And I can speak for Villages at Murphy Creek 3 and 4 together. And happy to take any questions. So these are brand new districts, brand new service plans. Despite the naming, which we have come to realize it was probably not the preferred choice, this is not part of the current Murphy Creek development. This is an entirely separate development from what we currently know as Murphy Creek. This is actually going to be known as Harvest Village at Murphy Creek. It is on the east side, whereas Murphy Creek is on the west side of Jewel. So I just wanted to clarify that because that was a bit confusing. Purely residential on both districts and population impact of approximately 3,700. And both of these proposed service plans are in compliance with our model, and they're both currently vacant parcels.
Questions of staff?
Mayor? Thank you, Nancy, for providing that update. I have received some, and I'm pretty sure there might be some other council members that have received some comments just about the confusion of the naming of the Metro District and the number. And the concerns that they have is it does create confusion. So I wanted to see if there's a possibility to rename that and possibly take Murphy Creek out of the name. for these particular, to actually solve that matter. But also, I understand by state law that you're not required to talk to, surrounding metro districts about this particular metro district because it's out of the boundaries. But there are some concerns about the amenities that these metro districts are going to be having. And I just wanted to see if, I know these are coming up through the August 9th meeting for council, and I understand that there is also an election, but I wanted to see if there could be a delay in these to solve the naming issue, and also to just see if there could be a possibility of some civic engagement just on the amenities issue that those questions with this particular metro district and the surrounding areas have. So I just wanted to bring those issues up as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad to respond to those. And we also have legal counsel for the district on the call, Paula Williams. So I'm sure if I miss anything, Paula, please feel free to jump in. To answer your question about the name change, yes, that is something that the district already contemplated. And there's a few ways that we can approach that. I do believe they are amenable to potentially pushing it to a further hearing than the rest of these districts to change the name now. Otherwise, they plan on doing that in their first board meeting, and I'm not sure of the timing of that, but it is fairly soon. So either way, the name, they agree and concur that the name should be changed. They did address the amenity piece in their transmittal letter, and since this is totally separate from Murphy Creek, this development will have its own amenities. There's no crossover. These will be two totally separate neighborhoods. But I would definitely invite Paula Williams to jump in to speak to, process as far as changing the name, and I think that might help clarify further.
Hi, this is Daniel Frank on behalf of, I'm not sure if she's on. I know she was perhaps stuck on, Paula, you there?
I was on mute.
Oh, there she is.
Thank you very much. I was just getting ready to say that we absolutely understand there's confusion in the naming process. So we are more than happy to delay and get the name changed to Harvest Crossing, which is what the name of this development will be. Daniel Frank is on the line. Daniel is a member of the developer, and I think Daniel can speak to the significant amount of neighborhood meetings that they have had going through the land development process, where they have had significant outreach with the other neighborhoods out there regarding the amenities. Again, this is a standalone development. It is in no way, shape, or form related to Murphy Creek, and they will have their own amenities. But Daniel, if you could maybe just go through the neighborhood process that you've already undertaken.
Yeah, absolutely. So as some of you may or may not know, we're currently going through the platting process for our first filing, which is 140 lots. So recently, we did our neighborhood outreach to neighborhood groups, metro districts, HOAs. I believe it's within a 3 or 5 mile radius, as well as the adjacent property owners. And it was fairly well attended. No real major issues there. One of the things that did come up, was the relationship between, this development and what we know currently as Murphy Creek. And so it was explained to the neighbors at that time, as it's already been kind of explained on this call, it's a completely separate standalone development that will have its own amenities and its own districts, and there will be no crossover. And so a lot of those neighborhood groups have already been involved in these conversations. And I think really their concern was, with some existing surrounding communities that are having sales out there, some of the sales offices may or may not be telling potential buyers that, you know, the amenities within Murphy Creek can be used by all. And so it's really, you know, I think an issue with surrounding communities' existing sales office. And once they realize that we're a completely separate community, brand new districts, brand new amenities, you know, that'll be owned and maintained either by our HOA or the district, you know, it kind of quelled all of those concerns.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Oh, Mayor, sorry.
Councilmember Hills.
Thank you. Yeah, I just, my understanding is that there were some concerns kind of raised about this naming prior to in the process, so that it came up that it might be confusing. And I guess since this isn't related to Murphy Creek, just in the future, if we can be more mindful of that, because now staff has to spend time fixing something that was never intended to be part of Murphy Creek to begin with. And it's just really unnecessary, I think, to put that additional workload on staff to do that when this is something that was easily avoidable. So just in the future, if developers could be a little more mindful. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been trying to do everything we can to differentiate ourselves, you know, by renaming the whole project. Because initially the name was Villages of Murphy Creek. And because of that confusion, we felt it necessary to, you know, completely change the name. So we totally agree with you.
Mayor, Councilmember Lawson.
Councilmember Lawson.
So just to get clarification, there will be, there will be a name change to this Metro District. Is that correct before it comes before council?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there further questions? Is there any objection to moving items number 2C and 2D forward? Seeing none, items number 2C and 2D will move forward. I think we're going to take a 10-minute recess. I've got some technical problems at my end, and then we'll hear from the Chief of Police. The time is now at 6:47. We will reconvene at 6:57. Council stands in recess.
The Access Live.
The meeting of the study session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, July 19, 2021 is called back into session. I know all of us have been getting complaints about what appears to be, seems to be an increase in gun violence in our city. I requested through the city manager that the chief of police, Vanessa Wilson, come before a study session to discuss what is the trajectory of gun violence in our city, what is the current strategy for deterring gun violence, are there any additional strategies she could implement, and if so, would they require additional resources, and are there any policy changes that are necessary that would require the consent of council. With that, Chief Vanessa Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. Adrian's going to go ahead and share her screen for me, so we can get started here. Adrian, if you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So, first of all, before we get started, the slide that you're looking at is going to talk about the increase in crime across the nation. I understand that knowing that this is a nationwide problem does not do anything for the residents of the city of Aurora. And I want you to know, as your chief of police, we are committed to doing everything we possibly can in our power, the men and women that work here, to try to quell it. It is something that I wish I had a crystal ball. I wish I had a magic pill that I could tell you exactly why this is happening. I wish that we could deal with this across the nation, because behind every statistic, I've said this before, we have a family that's suffering. We have mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, and children that have lost a family member. And so I want you all to know that I appreciate the opportunity to talk to council this evening and to the mayor. But I just want you to know that this is, unfortunately, something that we're seeing across the nation. Next slide, please. I've asked to show you the Major City Chiefs Association. There's 70 agencies that are considered major city chiefs across the nation. These are just some of the statistics that we're seeing. Homicide is up, aggravated assaults are up across the nation, and this is just the first quarter. So unfortunately, these numbers I know have continued to rise, and it is becoming an issue. Like I said, with aggravated assaults, just so people understand what that is going to be somewhere where it's a non-fatal shooting, where someone has either been assaulted with a weapon or have been inflicted serious bodily injury on them. And so these are serious crimes that we're talking about. And so we just wanted to provide some statistics for what specifically is happening in Aurora. Next slide, please. Our gun-related homicides the last 3 years, total victims, not incidences, but total victims and homicides in 2019 was 28, 11 of those were adults, 5 juveniles, and 2 were deemed to be gang-related. For us to deem it as gang-related, we have to have articulable facts for us to label it as such. In 2020, we had 43 victims of homicide, 31 adults, 2 juveniles, as well as 2 that were labeled as gang-related. 2021 year to date, unfortunately, we have 18 homicides in our city, 11 adults, 1 juvenile, and 1 that we have deemed at this point gang-related. Next slide, please. I've just provided our 2021 homicide demographics for you all to be able to look at, just to see that it's affecting across all races, all genders. This is a problem across the board. Next slide, please. So our non-fatal shooting statistics, these are our shootings that we have, we follow up on leads, and we go out on these cases because someone has been struck by a bullet. So a non-fatal shooting statistic is just truly the fact that we don't have another homicide. So as you can see, the numbers are alarming. This 2021, we have 57 incidents with 66 victims that were shot and that were not, thankfully, considered a homicide. 8 of these are known to be gang-related this year. And I think it goes to a lot to our partners at University Health and their great medical facilities that we have in the city of Aurora, that many of these people's lives are being saved. So I just want to thank them. I want to also talk about One of the cases that sparked the request from the mayor to have this presentation, the June 20th shooting where over 100 rounds were fired. I want to thank the public for submitting their tips to Crime Stoppers. We have some leads in that case, and I'm hoping that we are going to be able to make an arrest in that situation. Next slide, please. So the other slide here that you're looking at is confirmed shots fired calls. So this is where no one was actually hit, but obviously it's still an impact on our residents, whether it's a vehicle that was shot up or a house that was shot. We go out on these calls. We send our officers out to canvass the area to collect shell casings, and then we submit them to what we call NIBIN, which is our National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. That way we can match some of these shell casings to these specific weapons. So when we do take a gun off the street, we're able to see if it's connected with several different shots fired calls or non-fatal shooting cases, so that we can build a case on the people that are in possession of this weapon, hopefully. This allows us to link cases not only in Aurora, but metro-wide, and we do that with our regional anti-violence enforcement network, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Next slide, please. So this is just going to give you the shots fired calls by district. Again, it's going to show the years, the increases that we're having, and then, of course, the differences in where the calls are taking place. As you can see, it's District 2 for 2021 has had more shots fired called by district at this point. Next slide, please. So like I said in the beginning of this presentation, I don't know exactly what the reasons are, but some of the possible influencing factors that we're talking about with other chiefs across the nation, as well as my own executive staff, is that I feel as though violence is being normalized throughout society. You know, people are asking the question of why is this happening? I wish I had the answers. I can tell you that, you know, movies, video games, all these types of things, guns and violence are just part of our normal day-to-day society, unfortunately. I will say that the other things that we're looking at is that COVID-related. Obviously, we had issues with jail and some of our career criminals, us not being able to put these individuals into jail. And then due to the courts and them not being able to hold them with our COVID crisis, these individuals were getting out of jail immediately, personal recognizance, and they were out the very next day doing the crimes. We have an example of a motor vehicle theft operation where officers arrested some of these subjects the next day, and the same operation, the same suspects were contacted, even though we had arrested them and put them in jail the day before. We have an increase of firearms out on the street, illegal guns. It's a nationwide concern. We have weapons being possessed by previous offenders, what we call a PALPO. People are using social media platforms to buy and sell weapons. Unfortunately, a lot of these weapons are getting into the hands of juveniles. We have firearms being stolen in burglaries from vehicles where we have owners that perhaps don't have a gun safe and aren't locking these things up. And so we've just seen an influx of guns out there on the street. Unfortunately, our staffing issues that we're facing is limiting our ability to be proactive in a lot of our approaches. When I talk about staffing, these high priority incidents that we're talking about, the shootings that we're seeing the increase on, it ties up patrol resources, causing delays for service for lower priority calls. I know that's frustrating to the community, as they're waiting hours sometimes for us to be able to come and take the report. And so I just ask for patience as we try to navigate the staffing issues that we're focused on. Since January of 2020, we have lost 159 trained officers. 72 of those officers, whether it be retirements, resignations, or terminations, 72 of those have occurred here in 2021. So we are hiring as fast as we can. We are doing multiple smaller classes, trying to get, instead of us having to wait 6 months for some relief for us to get some bodies out on the street, we're trying to do smaller classes, 5 different classes a year, so that we're able to hopefully try and keep up with the attrition that we're seeing. Unfortunately, I've had to reduce units like our SWAT unit, our narcotics unit, our police area representative, our school resource officers, our neighborhood policing unit, which was the bicycles along the old part of Aurora, and also in traffic. We've had to reduce some of these specialized units. They're going out and being proactive as their daily mission, just so we can staff patrol. But we are still needing to pay overtime to fully staff patrol. And so, again, we are facing a manpower issue. And I want to applaud the officers that are working day in and day out, those that are taking on these overtime assignments. They are tired and they're weary. And I just want to thank them for being able to still be committed to working that extra shift so that we can make sure that our teams are safe out there, as well as we're able to answer calls for service to our community. Next slide, please. So question is, what are we doing here in Aurora? This cannot be a quick fix. This is going to take a long-term crime reduction. And like I said, if we're going call to call and we're having staffing issues, our ability to be proactive. And if we're having to take down specialized units, it's going to take a while for us to be able to combat this problem. But we need to understand why this is happening. Like I said, I don't have all the answers. I'm partnering with Christina Aperon, working with the Youth Violence Prevention Program. And I'd like to, applaud Councilmember Lawson for seeing an issue back in 2020 and spearheading the Youth Violence Prevention Program. The city, all of council got behind that and has funded it. And I just was on one of her youth violence prevention action tables, and everyone on that was talking about a long-term commitment by the city to help prevention of violence in our community. This isn't just the problem that the police can tackle. We need everyone to come to the table with ideas. We need to better fund mental health services. We need to be taking care of people that are facing drug addiction and those types of things within our city, and also dealing with the economic situation in our city that may have people turn to crime, may have people find themselves in a crisis where they don't feel like they have any other options. Next slide, please. Some of our crime initiatives that I've implemented, we are doing, Councilmember Gruber likes to call them strike teams. We are doing what we call directive patrol teams. We are asking officers again on overtime. That's the only way we're able to staff these proactive initiatives, to go out, work with the all three district commanders and their crime analysts to identify the hot spots within our city. And these are just a few of the successes that we have seen. Obviously, we have not been able to staff some of these because we're having to staff patrol first. So our priority is always staffing patrol. And I can tell you that what I'm hearing is our officers are tired. And so I'm hoping that we are able to do more of this. And right now we have been authorized overtime for the next 6 weeks to do this. And thanks to the city manager, we've been able to allow sergeants and lieutenants to actually work these patrol teams just to try and get out there and make a difference. When we have the time to make these stops, then we are able to be, making an impact. As you can see, we've taken weapons off the street. We've made 8 felony arrests, 7 misdemeanor arrests on just this group, that we've had about 4 of these directed patrol teams go out. Next slide, please. Another crime initiative that we've worked on, which was, again, spearheaded by the city managers, as well as I'd like to shout out to Councilmember Murillo, that she asked for money from council, which I appreciate them authorizing, so that we could have an impact on the Colfax corridor. So really the focus of this was high visibility, so that the businesses that were having many issues, quality of life issues, as well as just people selling drugs outside of their businesses, things that they were reporting to us that they were concerned about, an increase in crime along the area. So we're on a 6-month pilot program with this, and I can tell you that I did one of these 4-hour shifts myself a few weeks ago, and the community was extremely happy to see us out there. I was stopped many times with people saying, "We appreciate your presence." I can tell you that the focus was not arrest. The focus was community reassurance and high visibility to show those business owners that we are still here for you, and also impact people that were just taking advantage of the fact that they didn't see an officer, and so they were more likely to commit a crime or to do something that is negatively affecting that area of town. These are just some of our business contacts, our consensual contacts. These are the numbers that we've collected since April 25th of this year. Next slide, please. And then these are some of the enforcement things that we did. We did a lot of criminal warnings. A lot of these would be low-level crimes, whether that would be urinating in public or drinking open container out there. And so we really want to try and clean up the area for those businesses, and also to give people an opportunity to have a voluntary compliance. because as we know, arrest is not always the answer. So we did do a lot of criminal warnings. We're also providing resources for our unsheltered neighbors that are out there and trying to get them the help that they need, whether that be mental health services or just trying to find housing for the evening, working with Mile High Behavioral Center and such. And then we were also making arrests when it was deemed necessary and something that we couldn't give a warning on. Next slide, please. Here's some of the crime initiative special teams that we've created. The non-fatal shooting team, again, we talk about a non-fatal shooting. We really are just lucky it wasn't another homicide. So they are, this group is meeting on a monthly basis, and we're going over making sure that all of our detectives are sharing information so that nothing's slipping through the crack. We're able to make the linkages when we're all having a conversation. And also we're talking to Denver and other metro areas when we have someone that is prolific across the metro-wide area. We created a new gang and robbery investigation team. We were finding a lot of our robberies had a gang nexus. And so we created this gang and robbery investigation so that our gang unit, our gang investigators are talking to our robbery investigators. And again, we are able to identify any criminal enterprise that is gang motivated. And we've invited in the 18th Judicial District. We have weekly meetings with 3 of the DAs from there. And we talk about the upcoming gangs that we see that are becoming present and talk about gang cases that we have. The gang intervention unit is collaborating with other metro gang units on new emerging gangs and retaliatory trends that we see. Obviously, when we see a shooting go by or a shots fired call, a lot of times these are connected from something that happened, and then we're having retaliatory actions being taken in our city. This is putting, in my opinion, innocent individuals in harm's way. So we're really focusing on what we can do with gang intervention. Again, we are dealing a reactionary and trying to be as proactive as we possibly can with our staffing, but also we're working with our partners on how we can put these individuals that are career criminals. They're not learning from a chance. They're not someone that probation is going to work on immediately. It's going to be someone that we need to take them off the street because they're creating violence within our community. Next slide, please. Another thing that we're doing is collaboratively is we're working with Raven. We are the agency that is leading Raven. It's the Regional Anti-Violence Enforcement Network. We're working with ATF, our partners in Denver, Lakewood, other Metro, Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department. And we are looking at getting these violent criminals off the streets quickly. There's 18 local, state, and federal law enforcement partners in this group. We are empowered to take a regional approach to violent crime and gun violence. We're able to use the power of the federal judicial system. We can prosecute cases in multiple jurisdictions to include the federal level. And also we have a strong working relationship with the United States Attorney's Office. In 2021, so far, Raven has had 74 new cases, and they're still working 23 ongoing cases from 2020. They've assisted 33 law enforcement agencies in their violent crime investigations. Again, there are no borders. The individuals that are, they're committing these crimes in Denver are coming into Aurora or going into Arapahoe County. And so us having all of us working on it together, I think that's the best approach that we can do to kind of have a force multiplier, if you will, with our other agencies. To date, Raven's made 85 arrests, and we've seized 134 firearms, 83 of those being handguns, 23 rifle and shotguns, and 18 assault weapons. Next slide, please. So what we need to do as a city, in my opinion, is we need to identify a long-term collaborative and sustainable approach to, first of all, what is causing the problems that we're seeing, why the increase, if we can identify that, and then work together with, like I said, the Youth Violence Enforcement Network prevention program, trying to get them to be a part of the solution. And I know that Christina is going to present after me, and she's going to talk about, again, how this is not a quick fix. This isn't a Band-Aid. This has got to be a commitment by the city and not only council, but our community, in saying that we're all going to be working together to get to the core root of the problem of why crime is occurring within our city, and especially violent crime, whether that be the access to weapons, whether that be people that are, facing economic crisis, what we can do to help these individuals and get them the resources that they need. Next slide, please. This is just going on with prevention and intervention. obviously, this is just some of the things the city is highlighting, and I want to applaud them for doing. The mobile response team that was championed by Councilmember Hiltz, that is going to be a version of the Cahoots program that the Aurora has developed. And then just working with our substance abuse and mental health partners, as well as the youth violence prevention program that Christina is going to talk to you about here in a second. The mobile response team is getting ready to launch, and this will be hopefully successful. We've seen success in other parts of the country. And then, of course, our crisis response team, which has the dual officers with a clinician, will also be still happening. And hopefully, once staffing gets back to normal, we are able to increase the levels there. Next slide, please. I've talked a lot about our staffing situation. The response to that is I'm hoping that, and I've gotten support from city management to try and do a pilot program to civilianize positions, whether that be, like I said, a lot of times community members are waiting hours for a response on a lower level crime, still a major issue for them, still a quality of life issue for them. But we're hoping that we can civilianize community support officers. We're going to do a pilot program with traffic officers going and responding to traffic accidents, so people don't have to wait as long for us to take a report. And then I would like to see it, if this is successful, to move into things like a cold burglary report or those other types of things where you don't actually need a uniformed officer. And that way we can have better customer service for community. We've done the increased frequency of the police academy, which I've talked about, which is that we are doing 5 academies right now, which is extremely taxing on our academy staff, but they've been phenomenal in just trying to get these individuals through and trained properly so that we can get some relief out to the officers that are on the street. I've had to, again, reassign and supplement patrol staffing by taking down some of my specialty units temporarily, and hopefully I can get those put back together once staffing gets better. And then we can hopefully have increased police presence in neighborhoods with this directed active patrol, continuing the foot patrol on Long Colfax that I think is having a positive impact, and also driving some of the numbers down in that area. High visibility is having an effect on the crime in that area, which I'm happy about. The next slide. This next slide is something the U.S. Department of Justice. I'm sorry, it sounds like I may be off of the slides. What slide are we on?
We are on slide.
Okay. Can you go forward one more, please? It sounds like I already did the response to staffing. Sorry, it's hard to do this timing wise. Okay, now we're on track. The U.S. Department of Justice has established a national public safety partnership to enhance federal support of law enforcement. I received authorization from city management to apply for this and to be accepted into this program. Hopefully we will get this. It's going to be a while before I find out if we are selected as the city of Aurora. We put a proposal together asking for them to come in, and this would just be a public safety partnership. It's designed to promote interagency coordination by just coming in and a 3-year program looking at everything that we can do to try and reduce violent crime and use all the initiatives that the federal government has, and the whether it be the analysts or training or technology that they think that we should be getting here in the city to help us combat violent crime. Okay, next slide, please. We should be on slide 21. Additional support needed. What I would ask from council when you ask that question is just, helping me fund the civilian positions within the police department. I think people do want officers to be responding to the right types of calls. I know that's a priority for council. And so I think with looking at some of the community support officers that we see across the nation, I think this could be successful here in the city of Aurora. Obviously, it's going to take funding and to train these individuals up, and it's going to take time. We are looking to reduce, like I said, police responses to quality of life and non-criminal issues by taking that officer out of that situation where they can focus on more of the violent, high-profile crimes, and put civilians into responding to those other issues. And then also I really need support on us keeping necessary equipment that is used on these very violent incidents. I think just last week we saw, the bear in action. We had to use CS gas on that call. And I really, in order to keep these officers safe, I ask for support in keeping keeping this equipment, because I can tell you right now that we would have had a major casualties that evening, I believe, had we not had that equipment to be utilized. And I'm thankful that it held on and that those SWAT officers were safely taken out of that bear. Next slide, and with that, I will just turn it over to questions from council.
And that is, Chief, let me ask the first question. And that is, I think a key issue is you say you're down the number of officers. You've had a lot of retirements. I assume some people quit, transfers. So you're significantly down, but then you say you're going to civilianize some of the positions. And so what is the mix that you need right now between civilianized positions and uniformed officers that are projecting forward?
So I don't have a number for you, sir, but that's something that we can bring back to hopefully public safety. And obviously I have to work with my city managers to see what we can afford to do. But I think that, we are going to move forward with this pilot program for traffic investigations so that individuals aren't waiting for us to respond on non-injury accidents where an officer isn't deemed necessary. But I think it's very successful, sir, in places like Denver, where civilian personnel are responding to cold burglary cases, those types of situations, found property, whatever it may be, so that officers are out here just dealing with crimes that officers should be responding to, the violent crime that we're seeing, and then knowing that, our citizens and our residents aren't waiting for hours upon hours for police response.
So what is the number that you need in terms of uniformed officers to be able to fully staff patrol and to staff the specialized units?
Well, 745 is, I believe, what our last number was that we are authorized to be at. So I don't have that exact number in front of me, sir, but I can get that to you.
Yeah, you've got to have a plan going forward. You got to know what resources you need.
Sir, respectfully, I think I've just gone over several plans that we have put in place. And I don't know the exact number that we're at today. Again, we're losing individuals daily. I've told you how many I've lost. And we have a plan of trying to put 5 academies in. We're working with Civil Service Commission. But because I don't have a number in front of me, sir, that doesn't mean I don't have a plan.
So then how many do you expect the academies to be able to, officers to be able to field operationally, say by the end of the year?
We are hiring 20 officers per academy. And again, if I'm losing officers, a lot of times they don't tell us they're leaving until they're gone. So I don't believe John Schneevick is on vacation. Unfortunately today, he has those numbers in front of him, but I'll make sure that I have an email to you first thing in the morning, sir, with those numbers.
Further questions?
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
Actually, I was waiting.
Councilmember Gruber, then Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay.
All right, Chief. First off, I as we've just discussed before, I support the concept of having the uniformed officers do uniform work and civilianizing work that doesn't have to be done by a uniformed officer. I think that's a good use of resources, with the understanding that the uniformed officers return to uniformed work. So it's not we will not hire a uniformed officer because we've hired a non-uniformed officer. It's a question of making sure that we best use the uniform officers that we have. So it's not a question of defunding the police, it's augmenting the police with civilians so the police can do their primary duty. So I appreciate that. Second point I wanted to discuss is the crimes numbers that you showed. We at Public Safety every month, we discuss crime. Looking at major violent crimes are up 22% for the year, major property crimes 32%. The implication, or I guess if someone was listening to this who didn't have a background, they may take away the fact that we're talking about youth gangs. And I want you, if I could, I'd like you to clarify the issue between youth gangs and adult gangs. During previous Raven presentations, we heard that we have major cartels working through several Latin American countries. We have heroin, meth, and fentanyl coming in from China and Russia, managed by cartels in those countries. We have we aren't talking a bunch of high school kids or a bunch of young, sub 18-year-old people committing these crimes. We have serious crime in Aurora done by seriously bad people. And could you address that part of it? Because again, it almost sounded like if we can deal with the youth violence, then these issues are going to go away. And my interpretation is that yes, we have a youth violence issue. Yes, we need to do our best, and we'll have more presentations on that. But we have an adult violence problem, and we've got some serious issues going on. And the murders and things like that are going on aren't high school kids shooting each other; they're cartel people shooting each other. Could you help on that?
Sure, and I apologize if that's how that came off. What I was saying is when we look at long-term violence prevention, we definitely want to try and impact the youth before they are so far into the situation that they are going to become adults that are committing crimes within the city of Aurora. So what I'm talking about prevention is we are reactionary as a police force. We're trying to be proactive, but as a community, we need to start talking about prevention programs. And I know specifically I was applauding the city for focusing on the youth situation that we have. And then we're going to need to work with our district attorneys and as well as our judicial system to keep the adults that are committing crimes in jail and incarcerating them and making sure that they are being held accountable for the crimes they're committing.
So if I could follow up on that, the jails have been closed as a result of COVID at the county level. At the city, we have 3-day detention facility. I understand that that's taking people now. As far as the counties accepting folks that are arrested by the Aurora Police Department and the DAs, the district attorneys of the primarily 2 counties, are they fully prosecuting the criminals that we bring in?
So I want to applaud the sheriffs for dealing with obviously a pandemic and having to make hard decisions in order to keep communities safe as well as to keep the people that are incarcerated safe. So I know that the district attorneys, like I said, we are working with the DAs on our gang-related robberies, and we're meeting with them weekly to try and prosecute these cases and make sure that we are putting these individuals who are career criminals and that are hardcore criminals in jail and making sure that they are being held responsible for what the actions that they do.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chief Wilson. I know it's a really challenging time for you and the department, and I appreciate the plan that you have in place, the changes you've made, the effort. I like the directed patrol team. I think that's really probably was needed a while back, but I really appreciate that being done. My concern is, you said 159 officers that we lost since beginning of last year, 72 officers lost so far, and we're halfway through the year. Obviously, we're supposed to be meeting the 2 per 1,000 consent that you mentioned earlier. I think we're supposed to be at 745 officers. Do you know why they're leaving? I know that, you have exit interviews, but I have heard lots of things that, had to do with state legislature reform done at city council, anti-police sentiment, lack of support from council. Are those the reasons, or are there other reasons? I mean, I know some are just, coincidental retirement.
I think, ma'am, there's just been a lot of changes and a lot of call for police reform, which we are stepping up in the city of Aurora, and we're making those reforms. It's a lot of all those different things, right?
Right.
I can't say to exactly why, because a lot of exit interviews aren't occurring. So I can tell you that this is a very difficult job, much more difficult than it ever has been, at least in my tenure. And so a lot of families are very upset about what their officers are facing, whether it's the negative sentiment that they're seeing on the streets, whether it's the increase in assaults on officers that we're seeing across the nation. Ask yourself if you would want your loved one to be put in harm's way in that type of situation. And so I can tell you that we need support. We need support from this council, and we need support from this community saying they support our officers. And I need to applaud the cops that have stayed and are saving lives each and every day. That doesn't always make the media, but they're out there doing what they think is right and policing with integrity.
Yeah, and I think, just in terms of the ones, we don't want any more officers to leave us. And it's really hard, even when I talk to officers about why would I stay? Why would I risk my life? Why would I put my family's, entire savings at risk and then feeling unappreciated and again, nationwide sentiment. But I guess from a retention perspective, I mean, what can we do to let them know we need them and we appreciate them? I mean, we cannot end up like Minneapolis and Baltimore, where they defunded the police and then they had to turn around and hire, contract police because crime had escalated so high. And I know from my constituents, they're so concerned about the increase in crime that people are even moving out of here, out of Aurora, and just very upset. And of course, what I have to tell them is, I'm sorry, we don't have enough officers to deal with those issues. I'm sorry, we're losing half our SROs. I'm sorry, we're losing half our PAR officers. And, it's great that we have that foot patrol on the Colfax corridor, which I know is very dangerous, a lot of crime there, but I have crime in Ward 6 that has exploded as well. And not no one, I shouldn't say that, but it's the lack of resources have impacted response time and so forth. So I guess back to my question, sorry, I'm rambling, is on how do we keep the ones that are here with us, as well as obviously we're trying to attract them through the academies.
Ma'am, we're gonna go on contract negotiations again with the FOP as well as city management. I think there are some things that we can do, but I am not a part of that bargaining. That is between city management and the FOP. But I think appreciation and knowing that this council and this community embraces these officers and wants them to stay. But I can tell you that the ones that are here, they're working very, very hard for you.
I know.
And they're putting their lives on the line. And I just want to say, I appreciate them. And there is no easy fix, ma'am. We are being, there are other agencies out there that are specifically targeting my department to take officers from us.
Yeah.
And whether that's a better benefit package or whether that's just a better sentiment towards law enforcement. A lot of officers are leaving the state. I mean, this is a crisis, and this is something that we're dealing with. So as of July 15th, back to the mayor's numbers, I just got that. Thank you for this. We have 691 officers right now and 51 in the academy. Our total strength should be at 742. So that's what we're dealing with as far as losing. And the more officers I lose, the less capability I have in not just answering calls for service, but actually being proactive, ma'am. And I hear you loud and clear, and I hear the community loud and clear that they're tired of it and they want something to be done, and we're doing the best we can. But again, I think you'll hear from just one section of what we need to deal with, which is our youth. I think this is going to be a long-term commitment from the city and talking about getting prevention programs, getting intervention programs, and then of course our response as police. Our job is to enforce the law and not to fix a lot of the issues that can be done with nonprofit organizations and helping individuals before they commit crimes.
Yeah, and my last point real quick is that speaking to, the district attorney and other folks, that really a lot of the crime is people reoffending because they are not put in jail. They are, so, auto thefts and that type of thing up so dramatically. It's not necessarily like more people creating crime, but maybe the same people creating crime. So anyway, thank you for
there's a small portion of people within this community, suspects, that are recommitting crimes. And so, we have 10% of people doing 90% of the crime. And so we need to keep them, when it's appropriate, we need to keep them in jail. We need to keep them behind bars, and we need to have, I'll give you an example of an officer involved shooting we had. This person had a long criminal history. This was just the shooting over at Wolf's. He had on 2 ankle monitors. And then we ended up getting an officer involved shooting with him. So I'm not condemning the district attorney's office or the judicial system, but it is a reality that we're facing. And so this person should have never been out on the street.
Right. Thank you so much.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Chief, for that presentation and for the work you're doing. I know this is a very challenging time, as you laid out very well. I did have a couple of questions for you. The first is about PAR. And my frustration and the frustration of a lot of my constituents with PAR always being the first to get cut when we, have to move folks around. And I was hoping that you could, educate me and the public here on the model of patrol that we utilize and how come a, PAR couldn't kind of suit or fill that need. And the reason I ask is because there's a lot of information out there, a lot of studies that have been conducted on the efficacy of standardized patrolling. And it's a show that it's kind of a wash. It doesn't really have any noticeable metrics. So I'm wondering if we're doing something different here and you have statistics that can demonstrate that the way we patrol is effective. And if not, why not reallocate those folks to PAR instead so we can do more of the effective community policing that, you kind of talked a little bit about that we're seeing in Ward 1 citywide.
Sure. So we're having to utilize PAR and all the other proactive groups, and due to the fact that we don't have enough officers to answer calls for service right now. So the calls for service are in progress crimes that we need to be able to go to. And so, we can have a presentation down the road in public safety about our patrol, standardized patrol, and what we're seeing. But right now we are literally filling spots on patrol to handle calls for service in the different areas. So I understand PAR is very popular and it is good at helping the community police themselves, coming up with solutions, and I understand that, but I've got to give my patrol officers help. They are weary and they are burnout and they're facing, as you all see, violent crime each and every night.
Okay, so Chief, sorry, Mayor.
Please proceed.
Thank you, sir. So just for clarification then, so the only folks that we currently have responding to calls for service are folks who are assigned to patrol?
No, we have pulled other officers off of other specialized units to help answer calls for patrol. And we still have a limited amount of PAR officers, but we're rotating them through to have them do their time in the barrel, if you will, in a patrol and help us deal with the increase in crime and the increased calls for service.
Okay. As a follow-up, you did bring up a lot of, socioeconomic factors that play into, a lot of the background and the path, frankly, that is often long that leads people to antisocial behavior and then makes them, encounter law enforcement. So I'm curious, pre-COVID, we had spoken about socioeconomic status or census tract information for folks that y'all make arrests for. Remember, we had a discussion in your office when you were still interim chief. I'm just wondering, is that part of the information that you're gathering now, or is that still to be implemented, or are y'all still trying to figure out a way of?
We'll figure out a way to do that, sir. We have, I think we've talked about benchmark analytics right now. That's in the IT portion. IT is working on getting that implemented, and then we can create exactly what it is that we're tracking, but I haven't forgotten our conversation. But I think we can all see without us tracking it, we all know that that is a problem, a socioeconomic, and sometimes you have people that are turning to crime because they have no other alternative.
Okay, and that responsibility falls squarely on council, I think. So, we need to revisit things like wages, housing, et cetera, to help y'all in your job. So thank you.
Mayor Dave.
Further questions or comments? Councilmember Gruber.
So, Chief, just to reinforce that, you arrest people based on crimes committed and not on socioeconomic status. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir. But what I'm talking about is we're just talking about the city looking at holistically prevention programs, intervention programs, and then, of course, enforcement. And so what I'm trying to say is I cannot solve the crime issue as the chief of police by myself. I need help.
That's right.
And I need everyone to be involved in that solution.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
Yes, thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I think it was really helpful to understand some of the new approaches that are being taken to try to address issues, again, proactively, as you mentioned, and to work together with other entities to be proactive. I think that that's probably the most important point, which you just reiterated that we can take away, is that some of the proactive things that we need are not things that police can and perhaps even should be doing and would not fit with the stated goal of council to divert uniformed officers away from things that are not kind of in their training and expertise and really keep that focus on the violent crimes and things that are in the training and expertise. So with that said, we've talked about youth violence prevention, and you mentioned substance abuse, mental health. So perhaps you're not the person I need to ask this question to, maybe you are. How can we kind of build from some of those programs that we've started to kind of expand that to adults and to adult needs, since the comment was made that adult crime is also a major issue?
So I know Councilmember Gardner, Hiltz, and Lawson all were looking at a restorative justice type program. And to be clear, restorative justice isn't going to work on our career criminals. But I think that there are programs that we can do to try and facilitate different options, things that can be there, to be proactive as well as to try and rehabilitate. But there is going to be a section of a criminal element. Specifically, what we're seeing is a large gang element that we're dealing with. And so we're, like I said, the district attorneys and I and my team, we're all having these discussions on how do we take these violent criminals, the 10% that are causing, the majority of the mayhem within our city, how do we get them off the streets? How do we get the guns out of their hands? And, make sure that they're not able to victimize this community any longer.
For sure, I appreciate that. Sorry, Mayor, I'm not quite done.
Please proceed.
Ask follow-up, thank you. So with that said, it sounds like you're working with the DA's office. They have some problem solving and other courts. Are those things that you think would be beneficial to also have down at the city level, or do you think keeping them at those judicial district levels and just supporting them as counsel and from within the city is the right approach?
I think that would be a question better answered by, say, Julie Heckman, Mr. Brotzman, or even Judge Day on whether or not they think that would work within our municipal court. Obviously, like I said, as many people that can come to the table to help us as a city deal with the increase of violent crime, this cannot just be on the backs of the police.
Thank you. And then, Mayor, I do have one more.
Please proceed. Please proceed.
So then you said that after the current academy graduation, barring additional resignations or other attrition, that we would be at about 742 officers. So that would put us relatively close to where we were before the current levels of attrition. Is that correct?
So, ma'am, exactly you're adding is correct. But I just got a note slipped to me that we're already looking at losing 20 to 4 officers to attrition in that same time frame. So we're continually playing catch up. And so until that slows, we are going to still be in the crisis that we're in.
Thank you.
Okay. Chief, if I understand it right, that if you had 742 officers, you would be able to fully staff patrol and be able to fully staff all the specialized units. Does that number work?
We would be at a better place, sir. Yes, sir.
That number would allow you to fully staff both. Am I correct?
744 is our authorized strength at this point. So, yes, sir.
Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's me. Thank you. I think that number, that's the 2 per 1,000 consent mandate.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we don't need more than that, because
right.
Population, I mean, obviously it's tied to population.
That's a very good question. What do you think, Chief? What do you think?
Can I finish my statement?
Well, you interrupted my question. Can I finish my question? And I'll go to you.
I didn't interrupt you. You recognized me.
No, I wasn't done. I'm sorry, I didn't.
You didn't say you weren't done.
Okay, Chief, tell me what the number is to fully staff patrol and fully staff specialized units.
Sir, I don't have a number to give you at this point. Obviously, I think the point that Mayor Pro Tem was making is that additional officers would be welcomed to deal with this because, as I stated, when we have these violent crimes, when we have these shootings, multiple shootings in an evening in a district, it takes staff from District 3 to help with District 1 and vice versa. And so more officers
I agree.
would be better.
Chief, but what you're also saying is that to be 100% effective, we need a fully staffed patrol and we need to fully staff the specialized units. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay, so can you give, obviously not now, but I'd like to know what that number is.
Okay.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. No, my point was just that, and I'm sorry, I didn't think I cut you off. I thought you recognized me when I thought you were done. My point was that just because that's our 2 per 1,000 number doesn't mean that that is adequate to deal with the increase in the violent crime, the very different circumstances that we're dealing with today than we ever had 20 years ago. That was just my point. Thank you.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Coombs and then Councilmember Hiltz. Sorry, Councilmember Coombs and then Councilmember Hiltz. So please.
All right, thank you. So Chief, on that kind of question of staffing levels, can future presentations on that item include some existing data on recommendations for best practice of that ratio? Because my understanding is that 2 per 1,000 is actually higher than the recommended number for best practices in terms of police staffing. And maybe you have other sources than what I've seen, but can we get some actual studies that have been done on that subject and some presentations on best practices with respect to police to population ratios?
Yes, ma'am. We had a staffing study done a few years back that we can bring forward again and look at that. I know the city had asked for someone to come in and do an analysis, so we can look at that. And so, and then we're going to have to factor in, the number of officers it takes to safely handle these calls and the crime scene and all those other things. So obviously, I'm sorry I don't have magic numbers right now on what's going to make it better. Hopefully that we can drive crime down so that the 744 is going to be adequate. But again, I think everyone's making good points on, right now we're just trying to do our best just to answer calls for service.
Councilmember Hiltz.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Wilson, for the presentation. I know you probably don't have some of those numbers in front of you because this was not a staffing study presentation for studies. So I just wanted to recommend that maybe this go back to public safety for the staffing information. We did have a staffing study done a couple of years ago. We've gotten updates annually in the time that I was on public safety. So if it hasn't been done this year, maybe have that. And then also be mindful of when we are looking at that staffing, regardless of whether we're talking about 2 per 1,000 or not, but understanding that as we are shifting workload to civilians, that, that doesn't necessarily mean an increase in additional officers. I think if the goal is to be able to respond to all calls the most appropriately, that actual staffing ratio would need to be evaluated on an ongoing basis. But I just wanted to share, because I think we've just veered into a completely different topic. And I know, we get to stay on time. This might be a really good conversation to have separately. And all of the background from the past couple of years, I think, Chief Wilson's aware of it. So maybe put together just a, 2-page overview of from then to now.
I appreciate that, ma'am. And then the community service officers is really utilizing our officers, dealing with what they're trained to deal with, and then not having our community have to wait hours upon hours for an officer when maybe we could send out a civilian to do the same exact report.
Further questions or comments? Let's see, Councilmember Lawson and then Councilmember Gardner.
Thanks. Chief Wilson, thank you for the presentation and for all you're doing and your plan as well. I really do appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, what is the impact when we have officers or cadets that get out of the academy? They usually have to go with a experienced officer. How is that impacting you know, people going out? Because usually that's really important, especially just getting that field experience and that training. How is that impacting, I guess, the workforce, the amount of calls as well? Is that still happening, or are we just sending people who recently got out of the academy just into the field and they just are kind of having to navigate it itself? And I just wanted to know the impact of that as well.
Sure, ma'am. So when they're in field training, it's 14 weeks in field training for our basic recruits, and they do ride with a training officer. So they're not a seasoned officer. It's going to take them longer to complete these calls. We have to make sure that they're able to develop into a solo officer. And then they have to, it's going to take them longer to write reports. It's going to take them longer to do a lot of things. And so that is going to affect the time that it takes on these calls. And then I think that's a really good point when, you know, a lot of times community says to me, you know, I had 6 cops show up. Well, there could be 3 training cars. So they're riding with a trainee. And so it's not that we're, you know, elevating that call for 6 officer response. It's a trainee car. And so you're going to see a lot more trainee cars out there right now as we're trying to keep up with this attrition. And so it's going to take longer, and they're learning. And unfortunately, sometimes we find that they are not able to perform as a solo officer, and then we have to let them go, and we're back to the drawing board on getting new people in and training them up and hoping that they're going to be a fit for this career.
Okay, thank you for that. Mayor, can I just do another question, please?
Please proceed.
And then Chief Wilson, in your plan, I want to know, I know that we, you know, due to COVID, we didn't have the night out programs, which I think is kind of a unique thing. And I know your officers are tasked, and that's kind of hard to probably do. I just think if you head that back up, it might be good to have like some information for the community, because I believe that it's everybody. We have to come together about locking your cars, you know, be on alert. You know, people have these rings, I have these rings, and there's always, oh, there's reports fired or something like that. So I'm hoping that that might be in your plan as well. I think that that's a community officer leadership, you know, to really bring that forth as well.
Yes, ma'am. National Night Out's coming up, and then we're also, you know, hoping to, you know, work with community groups and help them realize better crime prevention through environmental design, what they can do as community members. And I would love to see a vibrant neighborhood watch program come back, to be honest.
Councilmember Gardner.
Thanks, Chief Wilson, for your presentation. Appreciate it. I want to dig a little bit more into the term you used a couple different times, career criminal. And I think when you're dealing with that type of individual, it's a lot less about socioeconomic factors than it is about other things. But I guess what I'm curious about is, can you talk and I really want to focus more on some of the more violent crimes, murder and those types of things, but how often are you all finding that there's a relationship between the parties? Can you talk a little bit more about how you determine if it's gang related? And then I guess kind of another part to that, are you finding that that from the public, there's a hesitance to talk to the police about what happened in these events, and then making it harder for you to determine that it's either gang related and or some type of relation between the parties?
Yes, sir, and that's a great point that you bring up. So I want to assure the public that the homicide numbers that we're looking at, majority of these are not stranger type situations. They have, whether it's a domestic violence relationship, a relationship where they both be in a gang or they know each other. It's not something that is just random. And I can tell you that we have a lot of individuals, especially if it's gang related, that are not cooperating with the investigation, don't want to speak to our officers on non-fatal shootings, shots fired calls, whatever. And they may be concerned about retaliation, and I completely understand that. And I know I'm taking time away from Christina and her presentation, but you know, I think she's going to talk about how the gang element really affects not only our youth, but you know, how do we get individuals out of feeling like turning to a gang is their only opportunity? So when we talk about the career criminals, yes, sir. The witnesses in these crimes, a lot of times it's a suspect shooting another suspect, right? That they're now they're the victim, but they were the suspect last week. And so we definitely have a percentage of community, the crimes that we're seeing in our community that are gang related and individuals that do not want to cooperate when we're trying to solve it. They would rather solve it themselves. And then we have to be concerned about retaliatory shootings. And that's when we're talking, like I said, with Denver and other metro groups to get these individuals off the street before they take it in matters into their own hands.
So to follow up on that, is it possible then that a higher percentage of the homicides, for example, could be gang related? We just haven't been able to make that connection?
Yes, sir. And then, of course, we do have, robberies gone bad where people, unfortunately, a young man lost his life trying to sell a gaming system recently. So, we have robberies where people are taking advantage and things go wrong, drug deals gone wrong as well. But there's that relationship that they meant to cross paths somehow.
All right. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Further questions or comments?
Persons?
Councilmember Bursons.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Wilson. You've gone through a lot these past 2 years, and our police department has gone through a lot. And, I said in public safety meeting, I've always had the police's back, and I always will. They work hard, and they deserve our appreciation, and they deserve for us to have their backs. And unfortunately, past 2 years has been very difficult for a lot of different reasons. Now, tonight we've talked about a lot of good things. I love the programs, the de-escalation programs, and I'm sorry that we're not getting the people to apply that we really need. But honestly, I have to ask myself, if I was in that position, why would I? The elephant in the room is politics has gotten involved in policing, and it's gotten in the federal level, the state level, and in the community level. We've been taking away things from police, and it's very hard on the morale. And we have to know that we did it, and they did it. The feds did it. The state did it. And the state even came back and put more issues on the police this session, and that has to demoralize them. But we have to think about what this is doing to our citizens. What is this doing to the residents of Aurora? When they do sit and wait for police to come, when they have their car stolen or their car broken into and they call, and it's hours before somebody comes, this is affecting, where the rubber meets the road. Yes, it's horrible for our police and our fire because it's affecting our fire department too. But it's John Q. Citizen. They don't want politics in policing and fire. They don't want to be woke. They want to be safe. They want somebody to come when they need them. And that's what we haven't talked about tonight. That they don't want politics in policing. And, until we can get that out, well, I don't know if we'd ever get it all out, but we have to think about the people it affects. So you've got a big job. I'm all about keeping the equipment that you have. I have seen over the years where Bear has been used to save lives, to keep people safe, went out on the road in the last snowstorm and got people out of cars so they wouldn't freeze to death. The man that was allegedly was making bombs. You had to have Bear to keep our officers safe, to get them close. Bear was just shot up last week. I mean, we don't need the equipment all the time, but when you need it, you need it. So I'm a big advocate for that. So I just wanted to say that, and I want the police and fire, all the first responders, that are listening tonight to know that I have their backs and I will do what I can. I'll tell you, our citizens were horrified when Mr. Twombly's editorial came out. You know, they think, holy crap, you know, he's being more woke than he's thinking about me. You know, they don't want that. They want service. They want the police when they want the police. And we have to remember there was a guy sitting in Washington, D.C. a few months ago telling us that Colfax is not a high crime area. And most of this council believed him. You know, I spoke up. I know Colfax. It is not no crime zone, you know, so, you know, it's a huge problem, and tell me what I can do to help, and I will help. I'll be there for you and all of our first responders, but I do appreciate all you've done, and I know you're searching for answers, but until we get politics out of policing, you're always going to have problems. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor,
Councilmember Coombs.
I think that Councilmember Berzins means politics she doesn't like in policing, because politics have always been in policing.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, wait, further questions or comments? Seeing none, Chief, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing the numbers in terms of the resources that you need to fully staff up patrol and fully staff up your specialized groups. With that, the time is now 8:03. We will be in recess until 8:08 to listen to Youth Violence Prevention Program update. Council stands in recess. are now back in session. And item number 3B, Youth Violence Prevention Program Update. Christina Amparan.
Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, perfect. Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Good evening, council members. Thank you for having me here today. As Mayor Kaufman mentioned, my name is Christina Amparan. I'm the Youth Violence Prevention Manager. I was hired to the city during the National Youth Violence Prevention Week that went from April 12th through the 16th, and since then have been working to develop the program. So today I'll be providing you all an update of the progress and specific program accomplishments. So this program was funded by City Council and city leaders after seeing an increase in violence among youth and recognized that violent behavior is a public health crisis. Chief Wilson just provided some examples of data showing the rise in violent behavior specific to youth in her presentation. Our city's leadership also recognized that violent behavior is a crisis, and we will need a youth and community-informed response that is inclusive of that collaborative approach that Chief Wilson spoke about. We'll have to work in partnership with agencies from a variety of different disciplines in order for us to leverage resources and address the individualized needs of our community members, which is known as a collective impact. So our program will focus on implementing a public health approach, which is what Chief Wilson spoke about in her presentation, where we will have to address the community, review data, identify risks impacting our city and strengths that we can build on, and taking all of that information to build a collective response. As we move forward with developing our program, we will ensure to use best practices and programming that has shown to be evidence-based to ensure that we have the highest level of success possible and expand on those efforts to develop short and long-term strategies. We will use a combination of prevention and intervention strategies to both serve youth and families that are at risk and that are high risk as well. As Chief Wilson mentioned, the influences that lead to a lot of the violent behavior that we're seeing are several and are complex, and addressing this crisis that we're facing will take time and will require us to change the community's norms towards violent behavior. So as you see here, these are some of the best practices and evidence-based approaches that have been proven to be successful both locally and nationally. These are some of the models that we'll review. Pure Violence, for example, implements a public health approach. The comprehensive gang model has been implemented and evaluated in different sites across the country and has been successful in violent reduction efforts. The review of local efforts is also important, as Denver has been identified by the Department of Justice, Project Safe Neighborhoods, as being one of 10 cities in our country that has been successful in implementing violence reduction efforts. Chief Wilson spoke of suppression level actions that she's taking with her department to address violent behavior. So what this program will do is complement the work that Chief Wilson is doing and implement intervention and prevention level responses to have that larger collaborative response. Some of these models are linked in our website in case you do want to go on there and learn more about each of these models. So what you see here are goals that have been accomplished so far in the last 4 months. Some of the accomplishments include hiring program staff to include outreach workers and a coordinator, working with our communications team on program awareness efforts, building connections with stakeholders that include system and community-based organizations that are representative of both Adams and Arapahoe counties that will work together to develop that comprehensive response. Many of our stakeholders have not been engaged in the past, and so this is the first time for many that have been engaged and have been part of this conversation in partnership with the city around youth violence. And so a lot of them are very engaged, very supportive, and are actively wanting to move forward in developing this comprehensive plan. The initial action table was held last week, which was our kickoff, where over 50 representatives from a variety of agencies came together to learn about the YVP program and what it means to take that collective impact and public health approach. And then next, we have developed our Youth Violence Prevention Advisory Council that is currently made up of 11 youth that will be supporting the program's goal to have a youth-informed approach, and will attend program-led and funded activities. You can find a recruitment video on our website if you would like to go to auroragov.org/empowermentyouth, where you can watch 3 of our youth advisors being interviewed and who are speaking of very specific challenges that youth face in our city. We are still recruiting for youth, and so if you know of anyone, please refer them to auroragov.org/volunteer so they can learn more about those positions. Our advisory council is meeting monthly, and the members are being incentivized. Our city also signed a regional compact with Denver, as both cities do recognize that a lot of the violent behavior is crossing both jurisdictions, as Chief Wilson mentioned, and the need for us to work together. So the regional compact has been created, and Denver and Aurora leadership has been meeting monthly, and will continue to meet monthly to be able to look at developing a regional response. Our program has also begun to assess and begin to dive into some of the current risk factors impacting the community, which I will speak to here next, as well as I'll speak a little bit more about the youth pop-up event series. So our program has currently funded 7 organizations who will be hosting approximately 42 events this summer and fall in different locations around the city. The first event was held last weekend, and events will be scheduled through the end of October. These events aim to provide youth access to pro-social activities, structured time, safe environments, and connections to positive adults to prevent them from witnessing, becoming a victim, or being recruited into some of the delinquent and criminal behaviors occurring in our community. As the chief mentioned, she is using specific efforts to have more visibility in the community. These pop-up events are a perfect example of a prevention level response to increase the coordinated prevention level visibility effort to help reduce some of the violent behavior happening in the community. This is based on a national best practice to support community-based organizations to lead these efforts, since they have the connections to the community residents. They know the community best. And so these funds will help build their capacity and will help fund opportunities that can help them with long-term relationships and ongoing programming efforts. So this is the application process that we followed. Interested organizations did have to attend a Q&A. They had to submit an application. I did work with a review panel of 6 to review those applications, and 7 organizations have been identified to receive funding. This list here shows the criteria and requirements of the agencies that will be receiving funding for some of those pop-up events. To name a few, each agency had the opportunity to apply for up to $10,000, provide a scope of work, and will have to track very specific deliverables based on their specific programming, and attend scheduled meetings with program staff just to ensure that everyone's on the same page, that they're turning in the proper documentation, and also getting support from us. One of the ways that we're supporting these community-based organizations is by connecting them with larger organizations or other city agencies like APD, like libraries, like Parks and Rec, for those agencies to be able to attend some of those events and inform the community of available resources, and also develop other partnerships. This here is a list of agencies that will be getting funding and the funding amount. Again, these events will be held in different parts of the city and will provide a diverse range of events. Some will focus on having safe zones, others will be partnering with our schools, and one is a faith-based led effort. These organizations have been working really hard to get these pop-up events up and running, and the program has been supporting them and giving them the tools to be able to have the capacity to go after some of this funding, to be able to develop the structure that they need in order for them to be successful in these efforts. I previously mentioned the assessment efforts the program is currently looking into, which is really important. As the chief mentioned, it's important for us to understand what is happening in our community in order for us to develop a proper plan of action. So the first partnership that I have is with Tri-County, where a youth and adult survey was created to capture the community's perception around risk factors impacting Aurora youth. That data will be used to populate an interactive dashboard that will be accessible to everyone and give very specific information of risk factors impacting the city and in what specific areas, such as violent behavior and drug use. Another partnership I have is with Rocky Mountain Partnership, who will be conducting 9 focus groups where over 80 representatives ranging from mental health providers, parents, youth, school representatives, criminal justice, and social service workers will provide their feedback and their input around how violent behavior is impacting the city, gaps in services, solutions, current neighborhood strengths, and all of that information will be used to inform our strategic plan that we develop. An executive report will be written with their findings and will include recommendations for us to consider as we move forward with developing our plan. So this is the structure that the program will take, will want to take that we're asking our partner agencies to support. This is a breakdown of the different support groups that we will need to be able to have that collective impact. We need stakeholders that have the expertise that can speak to some of these areas, such as substance use, mental health, community mobilization, intervention, specific services that can all inform very specific short-term and long-term actions that we can take. From an initial review of the city's processes, these are 6 areas that the program will explore to develop a response. Earlier, there was mentioned that adults are the most active in some of the violent crime, but we also have to consider how many of those adults are recruiting some of the vulnerable youth in our community and how they're recruiting these youth to be involved in some of the organized crime or some of the behaviors that support some of that larger organized crime. And so it's really important for us to keep in mind that some of these youth do come from generational gang families as well, or families that are involved in ongoing criminal behavior. And so we need to develop a multidisciplinary response to be able to provide a wraparound support, not just to at-risk or high-risk youth, but to the whole family in order for us to change some of those behaviors and some of those norms. As a city, we also have to consider that there's been larger systemic changes outside of COVID that have impacted youth. One of them being the Families First Prevention Service Act that has closed most of the juvenile residential centers that have left many high-risk youth in our community that are actively involved in some of the delinquent behavior going on. And so that's another reason why it's important for us to have that multidisciplinary team, for example, to be able to partner with our organizations, our partner organizations. So as far as updates for City Council moving forward, I will plan on submitting monthly reports on to Council and our city leadership on progress made, and also highlighting very specific accomplishments. I'll also continue to provide updates during the Housing, Neighborhood Services, and Redevelopment Policy Committee around our program to ensure that everyone has updates of where we are with the program. And so that's an overview of where we are with the program, some accomplishments, some insight into some of the activities that are going to be going on at this upcoming quarter. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Questions?
Mayor.
Of staff? Councilmember Coombs?
That was not me.
Not you, I'm sorry. Who? Councilmember?
It was Councilmember Marcano first.
Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for that presentation, Christine. I appreciate it. I did have a question for you because I didn't see it listed in the presentation or in the extra slides you showed. What's the status of Keep the Lights On and that pilot?
Yeah, that's a good question. So keeping the lights on, we've been exploring that, and what we found was that it was a program that was presented to council. It wasn't funded. I have checked in with our school districts, and right now the ask has been for us to look into specific pro-social activities that they would like to move forward with. The Keeping the Lights On project may not necessarily fit the needs of the school districts right now, especially considering some of the liabilities that they may run into with opening a school to anyone and everyone. Instead, they want us to develop a partnership that's more structured, more specific to address some of the needs that they're identifying. I have been in communication with Aurora Public Schools, and they have been part of some of our work groups, and that conversation is moving forward. And Cherry Creek Schools have recently joined, and so I'll be working with them on developing possible partnerships.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that you had already connected with the deputy super for Creek because he was very interested in the program. So, all right, thank you.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember Lawson.
So thank you, Christina, for the presentation, and also thank you for inviting me to the action table that we had last week. I have a question for you. So we've had some youth violence in Aurora, and I'm wondering how your team is reaching out to the victims and also to the people that possibly are maybe involved, because I know you have all these different services and organizations, but I'm just trying to wonder, is that part of this? I know we're setting up the program and we're moving and we're doing that, but what kind of action is being done on that level in terms of connectivity with the victims and also possibly the people who are doing the crime? And I know that there's some things that have to be filled with the police department, but I'm just wondering how that because we do have some outreach workers. So how are you approaching that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so this kind of ties into a question that Chief Wilson was asked, where a lot of the individuals that are being currently victimized by not just the gun violence, but aggravated assaults and stabbings have had some level of involvement that led to their victimization, whether it's dealing drugs, they're involved in some of the gang activity. And so what we have to consider is that a lot of these individuals do not want to report. They are not engaging with victim services, and they may not want to engage with our outreach services. So what I'm working on is I am meeting with UC Health representatives that have the AIM program, as well as representatives from the APD Victim Services Unit to figure out who's working with who's outreaching to who, and how we can support. A couple of things that we have to consider, especially coming from the AIM program, is that they have very specific HIPAA regulations they have to follow. And so we have to figure out how can we get around some of those HIPAA regulations, how can we support the work that their outreach workers are already doing without duplicating some of those efforts. And then how can we complement some of the work that Victim Services is doing? So that group has been meeting to be able to identify how the outreach specialists I have currently can support some of the work that's already being done. As far as reaching out to the individuals that are involved in some of the actual violent crimes, that's something that I still have to develop. So part of the intervention work group, the focus of that group is to begin identifying who do we want to target? What is the age range? Who's currently under supervision? Who's currently already working with an outreach provider? And how can we then work with some of those individuals that aren't currently receiving any services?
Okay, Mayor, can I do a follow? Well, I'm glad that you're doing that because I think that that's essential to addressing this issue as well. Just a question on these pop-ups. So basically the groups are not getting the 10,000 up front. They're actually having to have some measurements to determine the success and all of that of these programs. Is that correct? And I think I've asked you this question offline, but I just want to make sure that that is what's happening. We're just not giving $10,000 to these organizations. They do have to have some measurements of success of how, of the pop-ups, what they're actually going to be providing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the 7 organizations will be reimbursed based on the supporting documentation that they provide. And so that's why one of the requirements for them was to have continued conversations, continued meetings with myself and the program coordinator that will be joining our team next month to ensure that some of that data, some of those measurements are being accomplished and that they are providing supporting documentation for that reimbursement.
Okay, and then just lastly, I know I made this comment to you and Jessica Prosner as well. We do have some space here. And one of the things that I have brought up to you is that, kids need a space where they can, and I understand, we have a library that we have a community room that's not being used where they can have some programming, some, different types of things that come into that would interest them. And I know is that something that you're going to be considering? These kids need something like entrepreneur, how to become that, having people who have been and maybe in the life, maybe, training them on certain things, or just having people come in general, music, art, something. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, is there a place where these kids can go? Poetry night, you know, just different things that would intrigue the kids to have them think about something else than other than doing the violence in the community. And I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just saying that's some of the thought process that we should consider.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good question. And so part of the assessment that I've been doing is learning more about what are current efforts in place in the community and how can we expand on some of those. So there's already current efforts that we can help continue to fund and expand. One of the agencies, for example, getting funding from us for the pop-up events is a really good example where they have a partnership with specific middle schools. The funding that they will be getting will expand to serve high schoolers. The other partnership or the other thing that I have been looking into is Parks and Rec, for example. They're going to be partnering with our school district to see how they can get rec passes to some of the students. The libraries also, I know, doing some work around moving around some of their space to ensure that it's accessible to youth. And so there's a lot that we can build on now. And that's part of what we have to do is who currently has capacity and how can we build on that, especially if they have those connections already with the community and the youth. And those connections are really important because parents will be a lot more likely to have their youth access some of those services if it's an organization that's already out there. The music, for example, the poetry, street fraternity is a really, really good example where that's a partnership that I'm currently working on developing further and seeing how we can partner with them and expand on some of the programming that they have.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you have some really good ideas. I have a question on the pop-up partnerships, because there are 7 organizations. Are those located in a certain area, or was this, you know, citywide with all the wards?
It was an open invitation to everyone. And so it's, they're located in different wards within the city. Yeah. And
so do you have any that were in Ward 6, for example, my northern part of my ward?
No, I don't think we have anything up in that area.
Okay, because I mean, there's definitely kids that have issues that need assistance as well. You know, that live along Tower and Hamden, Buckley and Hamden, and those areas near those high schools. So, when you say you're going to track the results before you fund them, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding how can you track them, because are these kids that any kid can join that organization, or are you targeting certain individuals?
So it's different. And actually there is one organization that's doing some work closer to that region that you're mentioning, which is New Direction, I believe. They are hosting some events towards that location. And okay. So it's our website, and we can get a full list of all the events and addresses and times. But our website does have a calendar of events, and so you would be able to get more information. So as far as the measurables, they are different based on the application that the organization submitted. So as an example, there was one organization that submitted very specific funding for yoga, mental health, wellness, self-care approaches. And so their measurables will be based on the number of youth that engaged in the different activities, and access to the long-term programming that they will have throughout the year. Another organization, for example, their measurables will be focused around the number of youth recruited within some of the high schools. Because it is a new partnership that they have with high schools, they're really focusing on recruiting within specific schools, but also among the specific refugee community. Okay. So they're wanting to target very, very specific communities within Aurora to ensure that those youth have access to sports and
okay. So the measurements are really to get people in the program. It's not to measure the outcome of that they were, you know, that it prevented them from going down, you know, the wrong road, or that kept, you know what I'm saying? It's just, yeah. It's not. It's more on the recruitment, I guess.
Yeah, and the only reason why we can't attract that level of of measurable is because it's funding a very short period of time. And it's meant to fund pop-up events, so we're not providing a direct service necessarily that can track some of that behavioral change.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
So thank you for this and for the updates. I know you said that there's a calendar on the website that we can find for the specific or for all of the events. Will there be any type of marketing for specific individual events that we can share out on social media?
Yeah, I'm working pretty closely with our communications team on marketing efforts. So it's something that I can take back to them and see if we can do. Definitely.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation, Christine.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Item number 3C, Capital Infrastructure Master Plan, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space, Brooke Bell.
Good evening. If you bear with me for a minute, I'll share my screen. Adrian, do you see that? Do you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Brooke Bell, and for the public, I'm the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. At the June 21st City Council study session, I presented the PROS Capital Impact, or I'm sorry, the PROS Capital Improvement Master Plan. And that is also known as the CIMP. The first half of that plan. Tonight, I'll present the second half of that plan. The CIMP is a consolidation of PROS capital projects and maintenance needs that do not have a foreseeable funding source. And so to move forward these projects in any combination would require a bond initiative and potentially a mill levy increase to fund the capital, construction, maintenance, and operation. With that, I'll start. This is a review of a slide I presented on the 21st of June. This shows what typical capital allocations or funding sources this PROS department has. Open space, we spend about $6 million any given year on capital projects. Conservation Trust, $2.5 million. Conservation Trust, our lottery funds. These are ongoing funds that we receive annually. Gifts and grants and parks development funds are one-time resources. And grants come typically from Arapahoe County, Great Outdoors, Colorado, and Adams County. Parks Development Fund fees are developer contributions. And again, they're one time. And so if you live in an area where there's significant development, there'll be more parks development fees accumulating for projects in those areas. So we'll start with open space facilities. The first one is Plains Conservation Center improvement. There was a master plan done on the Plains Conservation Center in 2019 with significant public input from the neighboring community. And the master plan includes building a visitor center, and there would be a need to bring in utilities, so gas and electric and water. So the expense for that master plan is on the order of $37 million of one-time costs, and then increased operating costs of about $600,000. The Aurora Reservoir improvements. If you've been to Aurora Reservoir, it's very popular. In the last year to date, we are up 30% on our visitations, which is amazing compared to last year where we were up again compared to 2019. If you've been there and you've queued up on that one entry into the reservoir, It could be on a weekend. You could be waiting in line for a while for people to leave the parking area and come back out on that single entrance. And so the Aurora Reservoir Master Plan would include primarily a second entrance into the facility and also additional parking, and could create some area for larger scale special events. The Quincy Reservoir improvements are more modest. They would include improving the boat ramp, the beach, upgrading the beach area, improve the loop trail, add restrooms, and expand the ranger building that is out there. Starkey Ranch, there's a lot of improvements that go on there that we can fund because they're, again, modest improvements. But this would include improving the interior building repairs, creating a nature play area, expanding and repairing the parking lot. So 1.7 million for that project. Delaney Farm improvements. This would include addressing repair of the historic buildings, improving trailhead connection, making a larger parking lot. Yeah. And then now this is trails. For trails, highlighting canal crossing, there are a lot of below grade and above grade crossings that require attention. The above grade, it would primarily be for safety. And so we're looking at about $16 million for that project. Highlighting canal opportunity areas. These have been reviewed in the past with City Council. And they are consistent with the Highline Canal framework plan, and they would include improving some areas, as you see on the map here, to create some areas for people to stop, enjoy the area, and then rest and just develop some of the signage and create some seating areas and such. The Buckley Buffer Trail, if you look on the map here, we purchased with the help of numerous grants and multiple agencies over the year, many open space properties surrounding Buckley to create a buffer to protect the mission at Buckley. Against encroachment from development, and also to protect the area for natural resources and wildlife. On the map, the buffer trail that would be near E470, that will not happen because E470 is built the High Plains trail along there, so there's not a need for that trail now. However, the trail on the western portion of Buckley, that would be about $700,000 to construct. And we also have the possibility of a large regional trail connection, and this is through the Triple Creek Trail construction project, which would construct 12 miles of soft surface trail through the most eastern part of the city. As development occurs, we'll gain more of these properties, and we're looking at $11 million of one time. And then everyone wants toilets on these trails. And so we would be looking at an additional 12 vault toilets in open space sites. And then with the items I've reviewed in the past, as far as the undeveloped parks, the park renovation projects, and the open space projects, there always comes maintenance requirements. And so the next series of slides, and I won't spend very much time on them, there's just a significant need for parks and open space to have additional maintenance areas as we grow. And so these would be maintenance renovations at existing facilities or adding buildings at newer sites. And so, for example, at the Seam facility site that is currently under construction with Aurora Water, Eventually, pros would want a building to the south, and the cost of that would be approximately 35 million, give or take, depending on the size of that facility. Recreation events and facilities. We have some beautiful new recreation centers that I know you're all familiar with: Moorhead Recreation Center, the Central Recreation Center, and the Southeast Recreation Center is under construction. We have smaller community centers, and the Beck Recreation Center, and also Utah Aquatic Center. Some of these require renovation, and there's also there could be opportunity to build new recreation centers. We've identified 4 here. We don't have specific locations for those. Those would require a study. It would also require public input. But if we're looking at 4 recreation centers, the cost here, this was done a few years ago, and it was based on 2019 pricing. It's gone up significantly. Recreation centers are costing anywhere from $40 million to $60 million each, especially if you're looking at some of the newer facilities that have been done in the metropolitan area, Northland and Thornton. They're on the order of $60 million. If you look at the Southeast Recreation Center, we budgeted $42 million for that facility. These facilities could be large recreation centers. They could also be more modest and be focused on a specific group, whether that be our older adults, or it could be our teens. There's a number of things that could be done with recreation centers, or they could even be focused on a theme. Meadowwood remodel. If you've been to the Meadowwood, I would call it a community center. It's also referred to as recreation center. It is oddly arranged, and while the footprint that it sits on in the park, it can't be totally scraped off and rebuilt. It could use some updates that would improve locker rooms, meeting space, classrooms, and just make it more enjoyable to use, and actually accommodate larger interest groups as well. The Beck pool, aquatics renovation, that pool has reached its end of life. And so we are facing renovating that pool one way or the other in the next few years, if not sooner. And we're looking at about $4 million. We've talked about multiple ideas. It would include community engagement, but we've also talked about, can you focus it more on therapeutics and our older adults, and that is the population that tends to use it quite a bit more. The Utah Pool Edition. So the Utah Pool Aquatic Center, there is space on this site now. There is space on this site in the southwest corner, and there have been some renderings and thoughts put into expanding the aquatic center to include a gym, some meeting space, and turning it into a full-service recreation center. That's where it would sit, where it connect to the Utah Pool is in the parking area, and then the parking area would shift to the southwest corner. This is a concept. It would, again, require a bond initiative to do that update. We would be looking at, again, these are 2019 prices, that's $23 million. It would be somewhat more than that based on current construction costs. The field house, this has always been, this has been discussed many times based on some of the history I looked at. This would be a field house at the Aurora Sports Park off of Colfax. And it's been envisioned as a 60,000 square foot building. There have been some studies about that. It would include two synthetic fields, batting cages, restrooms, concession. And again, when this work was done, it was several years ago, it may, some of the amenities would be addressed through public input. And I believe this might be the final item. City of Aurora could benefit from an event center, whether it's cultural or it's pros or others. We could benefit. We would benefit from an event center. Would be what's envisioned here is on the order of 50,000 square feet. We don't have a spot or a location. I think there are a number of properties that could be looked at as far as placing this amenity, but it's a future possibility as well. Oh, we do have one more thing, golf. Golf is an enterprise fund, so it needs to pay for its operation. We do transfer a small amount of conservation trust funds to the fund to help with their capital investments. And but they do primarily pay for their own operations, and they have significant irrigation replacement needs and new equipment, cart storage, cart path improvements. They do manage to every several years replace carts at different courses and can continue to do that based on current play and revenues. But for these larger capital projects, they would need some support. Well, and I said we were done. We're not quite. The Aurora Hills Clubhouse. This has always been an interest to staff and a few council members. What can we do to update the Aurora Hills Clubhouse? It is a very busy facility, and if you pop in there on any given day, even during the week, that place is just full of people enjoying the restaurant. And so we would be looking at a little over $8 million to renovate that. And that completes the PROS capital improvement master plan list. Any questions?
Mayor Berzins?
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. Well, Brooke, you saved the best till last, the Aurora Hill. That's been on my wish list for 12 years and it hasn't happened yet. So hopefully something will happen. You can get it done because, it's easy to see it needs a refresh.
It does need a refresh, and we do a little bit as we can afford it. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So a quick question. Well, first of all, in the event center, any ideas about how to fund something like that?
Well, again, any number of these, as I said earlier, would require a bond initiative. We have not explored if there's ability to do public-private partnerships. These are big projects, not only the event center, but the others as well.
Yeah.
It really will take a significant amount of work to determine how to fund these.
Would the city center area be the logical place for something like that?
We haven't, possibly, we haven't discussed the locations there.
Okay. So my last question is on the golf course. And I just have a concern. I mean, I live not far from a golf course that was a private course taken over by the city because it failed financially a very long time ago. And so I'm just, as private interests keep building golf courses in the city, I worry that we're going to be in that position at some point in time to have to take another one over that might not make financial sense to us. And so where in the trajectory of golf in terms of the number of players, I know we had a spike during the pandemic, but the national numbers I read are trending down. I wonder if you comment on that.
So prior to COVID, the national numbers were trending down about 3%. Aurora was trending down, I believe, about 1.5%, if I remember the number correctly. This is prior to COVID. You're correct. There was a spike, and we're maintaining those higher levels right now. what would be really interesting would be for me to provide an update 6 months from now, once we're through the end of the season. And now that so many of our competitors have reopened, and what I mean by competitors for the dollar spent in households on recreation or other activities, whether it be eating out or going to the movies or going to Topgolf, whatever it be. So it'd be interesting to see what it looks like 6 months from now, and how we maintain that increase in visitations of the golf courses.
Good point.
I would share with you that Doug McNeil, our manager of golf, shares your concern about having other golf courses built either near or in Aurora because of the competition. The younger generation has not been playing golf as much as the older generation has, and we consider the market saturated, or it had been prior to COVID.
Yeah.
And I don't, he would say he would want to be cautious that it's not still oversaturated.
Okay, good. Further questions or comments?
Mayor?
Mayor
Pro Tem.
Thank you. Brooke, I know you and I had discussed earlier last week about the funding part. On the parks that are, we have the undeveloped parks, and then we have the partially completed parks. You had talked about where the funding comes from out of the impact fees, and then also out of the park development fees, and park development fees are assessed per home. So it's kind of distributed community by community, basically. The impact fees, I think you said, that are paid by developers only apply to, I thought you said 100-acre parks, which then really restricts where the money goes, because I don't even know of any 100-acre parks, possibly Signature.
And thank you. And I did get more information on that, Councilmember Bergen. And so what I can share with you and all of council is that the question was, how can the capital impact fees be used? And the answer is, and I've got the list here, they could be used on regional parks. That would be like Aurora Reservoir. They could be used on large urban parks. Large urban parks are typically the 100-acre parks. And we have two. We have one developed, which is Sand Creek Park, and we have the undeveloped property that we call Signature Park, and that is the one that is along Alameda Avenue. And if you're going east from the AMC, that big stretch of property that's near Buckley Air Force Base.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so, and then they also, capital impact fees can also be used on what we call special use parks. And so examples of those, and that's where the variety is. And so my apology for the conversation that we had last week. The variety is Hoops Park would be Hoops Park, Sports Park, Olympic Park, ball fields. So Olympic Park and Highline Canal ball fields are considered special use parks. Hoops Park, the basketball park on 6th Avenue is considered a special use park. Grandview Dog Park, so dog parks are considered special use. So when we reviewed on June 21st, when we reviewed some areas, there is also the area that's at Quincy and Hampton. That's not Quincy and Hampton. It's at Quincy, and it's by the Lowe's store at Quincy and Buckley, I believe. There's a piece of property. I hope I have the intersection right there. Thank you for your patience if I don't have that quite right.
That's okay.
It's by the Lowe's store in the southeast, and it's a piece of property that is designated as a special use park. So capital impact fees can be used at that.
So could a special use park be within a different park?
I haven't asked that question. I haven't asked that particular question. I don't think, personally, I would say that if you built ball fields in a community park, they would not qualify as a special use park. Because
Okay.
it's a community park, and ball fields in a community park are considered an amenity of community parks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion, questions?
Mayor.
Councilmember Coombs.
So I had a couple of specific to certain parks questions or certain projects. And so the Plains Conservation Center, I think all of those improvements are great. One thing I've heard from folks that live on the other side of the XL easement, which I'm sure you're aware of, is a lot of concerns about the prairie dogs kind of migrating over into their yards and neighborhoods. So are there any kind of improvements that can be made there in the park, in the Plains Conservation Center, that can help address that migration across that easement and into the neighborhood?
I will have to get some information for council to answer that question. There is a practice that the parks development works with the neighborhoods, and we need significant neighborhood support. I think it's almost, and that's what I can't remember, if it's a majority or if it's all, in order to mitigate for prairie dogs. So along the borders. So I'll have to get some information for council members to give you the specifics on that.
Okay.
I'll send you an email. I'm sorry, I don't have that with me today.
No, that's okay. And some of these may not be answer right now questions. In fact, most of them probably are not. Another question that was raised to me was in terms of having the field house at the sports park and having the town center field house being constructed, that puts them somewhat close together, at least in terms of the full geography of the city. So are there any other options for a site that might put the city's field house in a location that wouldn't be well served by the town center's field house?
So I would like to say about this review, it was built on projects that were in 2019 before Fieldhouse USA. And so your comment is a great comment. Anything that is being developed or considered recreational, a recreation center or the field house, there should be some type of evaluation on the revenues that would come in and is it competing with Fieldhouse USA? And so would it be appropriate to have that type of facility near Fieldhouse USA or not? And I think what you're saying is it requires further discussion, and these ideas and their locations are just that. These were things, yeah, just that. And so Fieldhouse USA does change the landscape for developing any type of amenity near Fieldhouse USA.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say on the field house issue of concern that, I'm just thrilled that they are willing to make the investment and that investment will help stabilize the town center mall and malls we know across the country need activities like that to make them viable, to bring people in. And so, and they're going to be paying taxes to the city. There's a private sector entity. So I'd be very concerned about any competition that might undermine it.
I understand, Mayor, and I agree. And yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Councilmember Marcano?
Oh, Mayor, I had one more.
Oh, please proceed. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So the other one is with respect to golf. You mentioned that the golf cart replacement happens periodically with the existing funds that the golf fund generates. My question is, if we wanted to look at golf cart electrification in order to reduce emissions and environmental impacts of golf in our city, would that be something that would require a capital investment, or is that something that the existing golf cart replacement program can accomplish?
So it does require some capital investment. I will be responding to that particular question as part of the part of the budget review that you all have been doing. I believe, and I may have this fact wrong, I believe that 2 of our fleets are electric now. The capital investment that would be required as a Spring Hill Golf Course, and it would require a cart barn because those carts are currently stored outside. They're gas driven, and so to have them electrified would require a cart barn installation with the electric charging stations for those golf courses. With regard to Murphy Creek, we have had electric carts at that golf course, but as the batteries age and the current state of batteries, those carts often cannot make it around along the Murphy Creek Golf Course with the current batteries. And so they have gone back to gas-driven or gas-fueled golf carts. And so the interest there would be to see advancements in batteries for the longer course.
Thank you. I think battery technology is improving. Further discussion, questions? Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So, Brooke, thank you again for finishing up the presentation today. I did want to circle back to Utah Park and just remind me, the original master plan, did that actually include the future expansion into a rec center, a full-service rec center?
Let me see if someone, oh, I got a message. No, I got a message.
No, okay.
No.
Okay, so either way, whether it's a rec center or some of my constituents have asked for basketball courts, so that's going to be part of what's posed to the community then as the option.
And right? That is a project that we're currently working on we'll start engaging the community on. Yes.
Right, great, thank you. And then I actually wanted to echo the mayor's sentiment about an event or performing arts center at the city center. I think that's the logical place to put it. The conference that we went to in Carmel last month really demonstrated, I think, how a great public investment like a performing arts center or something like that can really spark a lot of private sector investment in that area. And frankly, in that 20-year span that we've had, going back to 1996 when Carmel started their project and looking at that same area today in Aurora, they have a full-fledged city center with, a whole medley of services and residential, and we're still looking at basically empty fields populated by prairie dogs. So I think that the sooner we can get something done there, the better, and I'm really excited to hopefully have more of a conversation on that.
Questions or comments about prairie dogs? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4A, intergovernmental agreement with CCWCD for well augmentation. Alexandra Davis, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been a long evening for you all already, so I will be pretty quick, though I can answer any questions. This IGA, this agreement is in front of you because it is an IGA. It is a simple agreement. It is a relatively small amount. And the reason it's an IGA is because Central Water Conservancy District is a quasi-governmental entity. And as you are well aware, any contracts that the city enters into with another governmental entity must come before council. So this particular agreement is to provide augmentation for a well. We had purchased, you may remember, a little bit ago, some water rights. With those water rights, 15 shares of the Farmers Independent and came 144 acres of land. Property owned by the Boos, or the Boos, B-O-O-S. So I think we call it the Boos, the Boos property. And because we still own the property, we have leased it to a farmer to keep the water in use until we need it for municipal purposes. And there's not enough water on the land to actually irrigate all that land. This well is a supplemental well. We also own the well, came with the property, And this contract with Central Water Conservancy District will provide augmentation water for that well to allow the farmer to fully irrigate the crops for as long as we deem necessary to lease it to that farmer. We could do our own augmentation plan for the well. That would be very, very expensive. And we don't intend to necessarily use that well for the long term. So this is a much more economical option to allow the farmer to use the well while he leases our water and land until we can put them into the municipal system. The cost of the contract per year is approximately $16,353. The rate can change if Central Water Conservancy District changes their prices, but they will do so with appropriate notice. And it will be continuous until we either move the water off or for whatever reason choose to do our own augmentation plan. With that, I will pause and see if there are any questions.
There's just one question, and just want to be clear. Are these surface water rights or groundwater rights?
So we purchased the surface water rights. The well is groundwater rights. So the farmer will have access to both surface water and groundwater rights. The augmentation is for the well. So the augmentation is for groundwater.
Okay. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, Alexandra, thank you very much. Item number 4B, advanced meter infrastructure update and presentation. Marina Lurch, L-A-R-T-C-H.
Yes, sir. Thank you for allowing me to present this evening. If you can just confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I don't see a presentation.
Actually, no.
Yeah, I don't either.
We can see you.
Oh, well, hello. Let me escape out of here and give that a try again here. See if I can get it to come up. Better?
There you go.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you very much. Let me just get that slideshow going here from the beginning. Okay. So thank you. Again, this is Marina Lurch. I am a manager with the Aurora Water Department, and I just wanted to give an informational update on the current status of our meter reading system update. A little history for those of you who weren't here in 2016, at least when we started this. We'll talk a little bit about our old or our previous metering system that's currently in place as a partial hybrid at the moment. We'll talk about the new AMI metering team that we're going to be staffing up and our update that's occurring. We'll review the installation plan for 2021 and future, as well as talk about a few bumps in the road that we've experienced. Of course, we'll highlight some success stories and then certainly have some room at the end for some questions at the end. Our previous meter replacements, for your information, we certainly started a long time ago with walking, our manual reading, in 95. During the installation of 95, we went to the automatic meter reading system, which is our current AMR meter system. And that's the drive-by. As usual, the Aurora has always been very innovative. And at that time, we were the largest utility west of the Mississippi to commit to the AMR program. As we said, it's a drive-by system. It certainly reduced the number of meter readers at the time for the new technology that was in place. We also had some benefits of reduced workman's comp injuries. And then, of course, great improvements in our meter reading accuracy by just taking away some of the data, errors that could occur. And we were still receiving one meter read per month. In 2005, we began installing the second generation of AMR, and by 2011, all of the city's large meters were converted to the meter reading that we currently have in place right now. Just to kind of go through some numbers, just to see what the city looks like right now. We are approaching 91,000 meters points for Aurora Water. Over 98% of those are our potable meters, and then the varied ranges and sizes from 5/8 inch meters all the way up to majority of 12 inch, but then we also have one very large one at 20 inches. And as we said, we talked about the drive-by system. That's where we currently are, and we are proactively replacing those meters, and for good reason, because we are certainly getting end of life, as you guys have discussed in a couple of previous presentations. end of life is happening with our meters. And we want to make sure that we don't have mass failure before those meters are replaced. In 2016, we conducted a meter replacement study to select the next generation of meters. And with support from the council, we were allowed to adopt the Advanced Meter Infrastructure System, which is currently called AMI. The benefits of AMI very easily go from the walker to the drive-by and now to data cellular reads, where we're able to receive incremental reads every 15 minutes with data for your water system. Obviously improved leak detection potential. We are also able to identify if we have any tampering or any theft out in the system taking place. We can see it. We can ask for demand reads so we can see something happening right at the moment. And then the benefit for the future, if we choose to go down this route, is the smart city applications that AMI affords us. With changes in technology, you obviously have impacts to your staffing situation. And so when we were a walk-by, well, actually at the beginning of the AMR world with drive-by meters, we used to have 4 meter readers. We have recently reduced down to 3 and anticipate with, as AMI is installed across the city, the reduction of 2 more meter readers, 1 meter reader who will manage any follow-up needs that we have out in the field that take place. We anticipate about 35,000 meters. Once we hit that number installed, then we will be able to reduce 1 meter reader as we currently see it. And then, as I stated, those 3 current meter readers would be down to 1, and that 1 would be taking care of any issues that we have out in the field that we need to manage. And it talks about 0 FTEs, but really there's 1 that's retained but adopted into a different area in my section that would help with the meter reads. This number is back from about a month ago. We are currently about almost at 22,000 installed AMI meters, and obviously reaching that number a little bit closer here as we start to do installations. And we'll talk about some of the bumps in the road that have slowed that system down a little bit. Just to give a quick view of what the meter body looks like. You're seeing the meter body in gold here, just so you can kind of identify what we're talking about, especially when we talk about some of the bumps in the roads. The register up on top, which does the reading and tracks the water use, which is black. And then the gray endpoint that we talk about is where we are actually getting the water system information into our collection system, and that's battery operated, hence the bumps in the road, as we'll talk about here shortly. As I said, we've got about over 69,000 AMR meters still installed that we are going to be transitioning out. Our goal is that we are doing no more than our minimum yield as far as per month. We don't want to make sure we don't infiltrate too many installations being transferred out. So our maximum allowed that we are allowing the installers to do per month is 2,400 with a maximum per year of 28,800 to be able to start doing installations. So this is a 4-year project, or as we state in the profile here, it's a 48-month project. We started on April 21st of 2019. Actually 2020, April 19th of 2020. And so we are just a little over a year into our installation project. Feels like 2020 disappeared, so it's hard to remember that year altogether. For your information, for council's information, if you're kind of thinking about what about me thought process right now, we wanted to put in our installation plan for the remainder of 2021. And you can see in here our anticipated plan. As long as things roll out as planned, we should be hitting the Colfax to I-70 Peoria to Piccadilly area, Colfax to 6th Avenue, as well as Chambers Road to Airport Boulevard. We have plans here in the next couple of weeks to be infiltrating the Buckley Space Force base to be able to take care of the housing on that base, as well as the Mississippi to Mexico and Buckley to Tower Road areas. And then early 2022, you'll see we should be transitioning into the Hampton Smoky Hill and Buckley to Chambers Road area. Bumps in the road. As we certainly found out a lot about our city from an infrastructure standpoint. As we've been doing this transition to these new meters, we've got a multitude number of the way the hoods are built out there, as well as many different lid styles that are out in the system. What types of yokes that we have. And so a lot of our bumps in the road have really been about asset identification and truly identifying what we have. So when we go to install them, we understand what kind of problems we may have or what fixes we need to make in order for the installation to be nice and smooth. As we are experiencing in Aurora, as well as many other places, our installation company, the Badger Meter Company, has also had their share of problems with maintaining staffing in order to do the installations. Luckily, that is all starting to pan itself out, and we've got a good staff to be able to do installations at the rate that we anticipated. We had some, identification and trust in the lids that we were using out in the system. So trying to really get comfortable with the producers of the lids that we're going to be having, which are now composite compared to the previous manufacturers, which were a heck of a lot heavier and sturdy. The composite lids are much lighter, and in order for our signal to go out, we need these composite lids in place. So the lids are all being changed out in addition to the meters. The obvious COVID impacts we've had with increased costs and supply shortages, which we're running into. And one main point that we're kind of starting to come out of right now is just the ability to get the chips for our endpoints to be able to read. So that stalled us a little bit, but we've fortunately received quite a few meter shipments recently with full parts in place. So hopefully we're starting to come out of that bump in the road. Wanted to talk a little bit about a success story so you know what's coming your way, especially as these AMI meters start getting installed. We reached out to some of our large partners in the city to take advantage of this new technology. And so our Gaylord engineers are using Ion Water, which is the customer portal, to be able to evaluate their needs in their system and to support the hotel environment out there. We have been finding leaks very proactively before they cost large dollars to our citizens, as well as a lot of our commercial entities out there. And in here, I have an example about our Aurora Reservoir. We found a leak underneath the bathroom, the restroom facility out at Aurora Reservoir, which took quite a bit to fix this past summer. We finished that project up, but that was a large leak we would never have been able to identify without the ability to see what was happening when we couldn't see it. Conservation team has also been approaching commercial properties to make sure that they're taking the best benefits out of the AMI system for those who have had it installed. And the Ion Water portal, which is accessible to many of you already, but also going to be accessible to anybody who has the AMI system in the future, to be able to take a look and put alerts for themselves as customers. We can take a look and see what's happening on a daily use basis for ourselves, and also identify leaks before they become major financial impacts to us. A great example of these benefits of the AMI system right now is the February deep freeze we had here in 2021. We were able to identify leaks within 24 hours to 72 hours, which, in the past, you wouldn't see until a month to 2 months later. The even better portion of this is the majority of these properties that are identified on the screen were vacant or tenant occupied. So the impacts are, multiplied. You wouldn't have noticed some of these leaks in these properties until water was coming out the front door. So we've already seen some great gains with the AMI system. So we appreciate the investment in that system. Also wanted to throw in a customer kudos that we have received, especially from the property manager environments, commercial environments, where some of the stuff that they now understand how important that customer portal is to be able to sign up, be active on it, and find out what's happening. But as well as when we started the irrigation planning for the season, as customers have been opening up their sprinkler systems, they're identifying leaks on their own and solving some problems before they become, very costly for a lot of our constituents, which is one of the best gains out there. And I can tell you, we have, I threw a few up on this screen, but we certainly received many more than this as we go along, and it's only going to get that much better as the installation progresses through the system. So we're looking forward to what the future brings for us with the AMI system. And with that, like I said, we are hoping we're 3 years out from being able to finish that installation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you need.
Questions to staff?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I was excited when this was first announced years ago. And we're one of those families that has toilet leaks all the time, and we don't find out until we get a big bill. When do you anticipate, you said, what was the end date of when they would all be done?
We are 48 months out from it. We're about 15 months in right now.
Okay.
So we still have about 3 years left.
Yeah, I know. Need to speed it up. You said they're battery operated. What is the life of a battery on these systems?
Currently, it's an excellent question because we are battling a little bit of some of the technology that's happening right now where we're installing and we're having some battery failures pretty quickly. But Badger is coming out and taking care of those. We're reinstalling them without a problem. And I believe it's a 14-year life, but I will verify that.
Okay, and then on new development, do those automatically go to that new system right away before the home's built?
Yes, ma'am. As soon as if the first meter that's installed on any new builds is going to be the AMI meter. And we've been doing that now for about 18 months.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Further questions or comments? When you used, when the city used people to do the meter reading, you mentioned workers' comp injuries. Were those dog bites?
Oh, dog bites, jumping fences. I can imagine there were many others. Hopefully less dog bites than anything, though.
Okay. Okay. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Item number 4C, a 6-month funding agreement between the City of Aurora, Colorado, and Aurora Arapahoe Battered Women's Shelter Incorporated, DBA Gateway Battered Women's Services. Lana Dalton.
Well, thank you, Mayor. My name is Lana Dalton. I'm the Homelessness Programs Manager for the city. So this is an extension of funds from when we initially started these funds in January. We had to do 6-month agreements this time due to the lack of surcharge funds from 2020. And so with that, we're bringing this back to you to fund the next 6 months for Gateway Domestic Violence Shelter.
Questions of staff? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. I see no items from the City Council, no call-ups, no miscellaneous items, and no items removed from the agenda. With that, thanks everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Night, y'all.